Hi, it's Michelle Darnay, and I am at the HP Briefing Center in Cupertino, California, and I am ecstatic to be with my friend, Burlingham, who wrote the book Small Giants. He is actually the keynote speaker this evening. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Michelle.
I
Good
love
to be here.
this book. I'm excited. I'm excited about the entrepreneurs in it. Tell me, I know you had a vetting process, and I know that you changed that sort of model or that vetting process a little bit and tweaked it as you went through.
Yeah.
Can you explain to the viewer?
Yeah, sure. I came up with a set of criteria that I was going to use. It actually started with one company that's in the book called Zingerman's. Well, what started out as Zingerman's Deli. It's now called Zingerman's Community of Businesses. And they were a company that had been extremely successful, and they had the opportunity to get very big, to go national, to franchise, to do whatever. And they decided they didn't want to do that because they had other goals they considered more important. And I went to visit them. I did an article on them. I was blown away by the creativity of what they did and by the quality of the people that they were able to attract. I mean, people would take, they from big corporations would take big cuts in salary to go work there, or people who'd been partners in national accounting firms would leave in order to go and bake bread at this company. And it was a pretty cool company. In fact, when we published the article, it was called The Coolest Small Company in America.
Got it.
And I got a call, I got a big response from readers, and I got a call from a publisher who said he liked the article. He was wondering if there were other companies out there that, like Zingerman's, had the opportunity to get a lot bigger, a lot faster, but had chosen not to because they had other goals they considered more important than getting big fast. And I thought that was, I'd been at Inc. for 20 years by that point. So I thought, I didn't know the answer to that question. I'd seen thousands of companies, but I said, geez, that's a really good question. So I wound up going out to try and see if there were other companies like this. And what I found is that there were lots and lots of them. I wound up deciding to focus on 14. Basically, 6 criteria that I used to select them. Number one, I wanted companies that had reached a certain point where they could have gotten very, very big if they wanted to, but they chose not to because they had other goals that they thought were more important. Number two, I wanted companies that were considered the best at what they did by the people who knew the company best, including their competitors.
Okay.
In other words, if you were to ask their competitors, what are the great companies in this business, they would name that company.
Okay.
Number three, I wanted to have companies that had an impact outside their industries and had been recognized by independent third parties for their contributions to their community, the world, what have you, society, and so forth. Number four, I wanted companies that had been around long enough to experience the ups and downs of business. I had, in my years at Inc., I'd run into lots of companies that, had done well for 4 or 5 years and then hit their first crisis and they couldn't survive. I wanted companies that had been through that, had already hit the hard times, had managed to remain profitable. Fifth, I wanted companies that were what I called human scale. In other words, companies that were still of a size where everybody in the company could know everybody else.
So what would that be considered?
Well,
How many?
it would depend on the person.
Okay.
Depend on the CEO usually. There are different. I didn't know going in. I said, but I knew I had to address this question of scale because I knew it was relevant to this. What I found was that, for some companies that might be 50 employees. For other companies it might be 150 employees, and for a few companies it might be as large as 1,000 employees. And I really looked at companies to see, well, okay, how big can you be and still sort of have these special qualities? And then finally, I wanted companies that had the special qualities. Now, it's what I call in the book mojo.
Right.
And what I mean by that is the business equivalent of charisma. When a leader has charisma, you want to follow him or her. When a business has charisma, you want to be associated with that business. You want to buy from it, you want to sell to it, you want to work for it, you want to wear its t-shirts and caps. If there's an article about it, you want to read that article. If there's a book written about it, you want to read that book. It's what you feel when you're in the presence of greatness in business. And when I started there, January of 1983, time flies.
Right.
It was a very, very exciting time. It was really the beginning of the entrepreneurial economy, and there were all these great companies around: Apple, Microsoft, Body Shop, Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia, and so forth. They were still, Staples, Paychex. They were still very young. And I happened to be in a spot where I got to know a lot of those companies and their leaders when they were still pretty young. And one of the things that I noticed was that the best of those companies, the greatest of those companies, had this special thing going for them that you could feel. It was, if you spent time around them, if you talked to their employees, you talked to their customers, it was just something that was hard to define, but it was, everybody recognized it. In the course of doing this book, I finally came up with a name for it, namely Mojo. And so the companies that I looked for, I wanted to make sure that they had that mojo.
Do you find that the CEOs and the founders of these businesses, they all possess it, right?
Yeah.
On some level?
Well, what the founders have are two things. Number one, they know who they are and where they're going and why. They know why they're in business, what they want out of business, and why they want that. They couldn't make the decisions that they did if they didn't know that. And the second thing that they have is this incredible passion for what their companies do. So if you talk to Fritz Maytag at Anchor Brewing about beer, when he bought Anchor Brewing in 1976 for $3,000. He knew nothing about making beer. Now
that's it? $3,000? Wow.
Well, it had been around since the gold rush. And it had been through a lot of ups and downs. Been through all the earthquakes and fires and everything, and it was about to go out of business. And he sort of liked it, so he decided to buy it. And he had to completely learn the brewing business. And he eventually produced the first Anchor Steam beers in bottles, and that was really the beginning of the whole craft brewing revolution in the beer industry. It was really the first craft brew that was out there. It's his passion. I mean, that's true. One of the people in the book is a guy who I write with now. I actually wrote another book with him named Norm Brodsky, and he's in the record storage business. Now, in record storage, what you do is you put boxes on shelves and you take boxes off shelves. That's what record storage is all about.
But Norm's passionate about this, right?
How do you get passionate about it? Well,
Exactly.
You talk to him and he is totally passionate about it. It's like, he likes nothing better than to walk into his warehouses and smell the cardboard. And, he's passionate about providing great service. He's passionate about creating a great place to work for his employees. He's passionate about being a great citizen of his community. And he's passionate about having a great life, and he has a great life.
Tell me, out of all of the entrepreneurs that you discuss in your book, do they all have a common thread, other than passion we talked about? But is there anything that really sort of ties them all together?
Well, what I do in the book is I look at their companies and I say, okay, these are all companies that have this fairy dust, the mojo.
Right.
And the question I had was really, where does it come from? How did they get this? And I decided to answer that question by looking at what these companies had in common. And I came up with actually 5 characteristics that they have in common. It turns out I missed one, which was very important. If I ever write another version of it, I'd have another chapter in there. So there are really sort of six characteristics that the companies have in common. Now, that said, how they came to that are very, very different routes. I mean, in some ways, what's most interesting about these companies are the diverse paths and the different types of people that all sort of wound up in the same place promoting the same things that give them this special quality.
So the special quality then you believe can be created?
Yes,
Okay.
I
Okay.
do. In fact, I think it has to be created. Not only can it be created, it can be lost. And most of the companies that I knew back in the 80s that had it,
Mhm.
lost it.
And why do you think that is?
They got too big.
Okay.
They became bureaucratic. They, they began to operate. What they lost was the intimacy. In most cases,
Mhm.
they lost the intimacy that you can get when a company is small. I mean, if you look at the common thread among these companies, is they have very intimate relationships with their community where they do business, or the communities in which they do business. They have an intimate relationship with their customers, and I mean intimate. I mean to the extent that they really promote and cultivate one-on-one relationships with customers.